In the Warhammer 40,000 universe, the Imperium of man, chaos, and myriad Xenos forces wage an eternal struggle for survival, conquest, and dominion. Among the most enigmatic and terrifying constructs birthed from this dark cosmos are the Arks of Omen. Towering amalgamations of metal, flesh, and corrupted starship technology, these colossal vessels have emerged as harbingers of despair and devastation, their very name evoking dread among even the most stalwart defenders of the Imperium. But what are these Arks truly? How are they built, and what purpose do they serve? To comprehend the significance of these horrific constructs, one must first gaze into the abyss of chaos itself, a dimension where reality and nightmare intertwine, and where the wills of malevolent beings shape the fate of countless souls. The Arks of Omen are more than just weapons. They are manifestations of a grand design, born from dark ambition and infernal machinations that defy the natural order. Their construction is an enigma shrouded in mystery, whispered about in fearful tones across the galaxy. These monstrous vessels are not the product of any single faction or known technology, but are instead forged through a process both alien and arcane. They are not mere starships, but engines of terror, imbued with powers that twist the very fabric of reality. The secrets of their creation lie buried deep within the lore of the galaxy, concealed by those who understand their power and feared by those who do not. To set the stage for understanding the Arks of Omen, one must acknowledge the volatile state of the galaxy itself. This is a time of upheaval and decay, where ancient alliances falter and the boundaries between order and chaos blur. It is within this turbulent backdrop that the Arks have emerged, each one a catalyst for destruction and a symbol of the encroaching darkness. In this narrative, we will unravel the story behind the Arks of Omen, exploring their origins, the key players involved in their creation and deployment, the circumstances that led to their emergence, and the devastating impact they have had on the galaxy. Through this journey, we will delve into the technologies and tactics that make these constructs unique, the heroes and villains who have shaped their history, and the unanswered questions that continue to haunt those who dare to confront their existence. As we embark on this exploration, remember that the Arks of Omen are not just relics of a dark age or tools of war. They are reflections of a galaxy teetering on the edge of annihilation. They are the embodiment of fear, ambition, and the unrelenting march of entropy, a grim reminder that in the 41st millennium, there is only war, and even the stars themselves are not safe from its horrors. At the heart of the story behind the Arks of Omen lies a diverse ensemble of factions and individuals, each playing a distinct role in the intricate web of their creation and deployment. These colossal constructs are the result of more than raw power. They are born from ambition, treachery, and unholy alliances, each participant contributing a piece to this dark puzzle. One of the most pivotal forces behind the existence of these monstrous vessels is chaos. Among its shadowed pantheon, specific factions and warlords stand out for their singular obsession with reshaping reality through destruction. The followers of the Chaos Gods, each driven by their patron's sinister agenda, view the Arks as a means to extend their influence across the stars. Some seek conquest and ruin for its own sake, while others perceive these vessels as tools of divine wrath or cosmic ascendancy. Central to the orchestration of the Arks of Omen is the role of those steeped in ancient knowledge and profane sorcery. Warp-bound sorcerers and dark engineers, known for their ability to twist both matter and spirit, channel the chaotic energies needed to forge these machines. These individuals are architects in the most literal sense, capable of bending the natural laws of physics to their will. They are tasked with more than summoning destruction. They must bind the intangible horrors of the warp into a stable, albeit nightmarish form. The corrupted fabricators who toil at the construction of these vessels are no ordinary artisans. Their expertise surpasses that of mortal craftsmen, often due to profane enhancements and dark rituals. These smiths of chaos-tainted industry operate on vast hell forges scattered across war-torn space. Their workshops echo with the clang of cursed metal, the hum of biomechanical grafting, and the tortured screams of enslaved beings forced into the creation process. Without these forge worlds of damnation, the construction of the Arks would be impossible. However, the Chaos forces are not alone in this endeavor. There exist shadowy agents with unclear loyalties who either assist or seek to manipulate the process for their own ends, rogue elements within the wider galaxy, whether former Imperial defectors, fallen Xenos, or other malign actors, sometimes barter with forbidden knowledge in exchange for power or survival. These individuals often find themselves serving as pawns in a far greater scheme, their ambitions swallowed by the insatiable hunger of the warp. Another vital element in the creation and navigation of these vessels is the presence of beings capable of mastering the volatile interaction between the warp and real space. Without navigators attuned to these energies, the Arks would be uncontrollable, drifting aimlessly or consumed by their own malevolent power. These specialized individuals ensure the Arks remain a cohesive force rather than a self-destructive anomaly. Among the forces aligned against the Arks are the remnants of Imperial factions who have borne witness to their horrors firsthand. Despite their inability to comprehend the full scope of the threat, certain war leaders and agents of the Imperium have become fixated on stopping the spread of these cursed vessels at any cost. In their pursuit, they often clash with one another, divided by differing interpretations of duty and survival. Even those outside the Imperium, such as isolated human enclaves or splintered remnants of fallen empires, may find themselves unwilling participants in the unfolding chaos. Lastly, there are those within the ranks of Chaos who dissent from the grand plan surrounding the Arks of Omen. Some view the entire endeavor as a blasphemous affront to their own designs, while others seek to wrest control of the process to serve their private ambitions. These internal conflicts further complicate the narrative, creating layers of betrayal and infighting that only deepen the destructive potential of the Arks. In the vast theater of galactic conflict, the Arks of Omen are not merely starships. They are the focal point of an elaborate convergence of agendas. The actors in this grim tale range from mortal artisans corrupted by the promise of power to demonic entities bound to the will of greater masterminds. Together, they form the tapestry of a conflict that will reshape the future of the galaxy, leaving devastation in its wake and echoing the harrowing truth that the Warhammer universe spares no one from its grasp. The origins of the Arks of Omen can be traced to a complex convergence of events that reshaped the grim, war-torn galaxy. At its core, their emergence represents the culmination of escalating desperation, ambition, and ancient knowledge resurfacing at a time when the galaxy teeters on the brink of collapse. The seeds of their creation were sown long before the first Ark drifted into the void, rooted in the age-old struggle between order and chaos, coupled with technological and esoteric advancements fueled by conflict and ruin. One of the defining precursors to the rise of these horrifying constructs was the growing instability of the galaxy. The fractures within the Imperium, combined with the unrelenting expansion of hostile forces, created the perfect storm for dark machinations to flourish. The spread of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the great rift that divided the galaxy in two, shattered countless established warp routes, isolating entire systems and fueling panic, despair, and opportunism. The tumultuous conditions allowed shadowy warlords and sorcerers to seize the initiative, pursuing ever more destructive means to consolidate power and spread terror. A crucial factor in the inception of the Arks of Omen was the rediscovery and corruption of ancient voidcraft technologies, long buried beneath the ruins of forgotten wars. Some of these technological relics dated back to the Dark Age of technology, when humanity possessed unimaginable knowledge of starship design and warp navigation. Over the millennia, fragments of this advanced engineering were uncovered, studied, and, in many cases, corrupted by those who sought to weaponize them. The melding of these arcane remnants with warp-forged sorcery provided the foundation for the Arks, an unholy fusion of science and malevolence that transcended conventional engineering. The influence of the warp played an equally vital role. As the barriers between real space and the immaterium thinned, Raw chaos bled into reality, offering those willing to embrace its madness the ability to reshape matter itself. This surge in warp-tainted energy emboldened factions to pursue projects that would have been deemed impossible in previous eras. The construction of vast, self-sustaining war engines capable of housing legions of warriors and tearing through the fabric of space became a grim possibility, given the right combination of knowledge and sacrifice. Another contributing factor was the sheer exhaustion of conventional means of war. The endless attrition of galactic conflict left many factions searching for a decisive edge. In the eyes of some warlords, the Arks of Omen were not just weapons, but instruments of finality, tools designed to end wars in ways no fleet or army could match. The idea of creating mobile fortresses imbued with an otherworldly presence appealed to those who saw traditional strategies as insufficient. The philosophy of overwhelming destruction as a pathway to dominance began to permeate the ambitions of chaos forces and rogue elements across the galaxy. The creation of the Arks was further fueled by an ethos of domination and deterrence. The construction of these massive vessels was intended to send a clear message. Their mere existence was a testament to the unrestrained potential of chaos-fueled ingenuity. This ethos drew upon the fear inherent in the Imperium's fractured state, as it had long been proven that fear alone could weaken entire sectors before a single shot was fired. By deploying constructs that defied natural comprehension, the architects behind the Arks hoped to instill despair in their enemies, making resistance seem futile. The methods used to gather the resources necessary for these nightmarish constructs often led to devastating raids on already vulnerable worlds. These brutal campaigns disrupted any remaining stability within star systems, resulting in widespread destruction and further destabilizing the warp's already tenuous balance. Entire colonies were rendered barren, their populations either enslaved or sacrificed to fuel the infernal forges responsible for crafting key components of the Arks. This relentless cycle of harvesting and destruction created a ripple effect across the galaxy, exacerbating the desperation of those who still clung to survival. The philosophical shift among certain factions also played a crucial role in the development of these warships. Some within the ranks of chaos began to view the destruction of planets not as a strategic necessity, but as a form of sacrament, a ritualistic act that honored their dark patrons and demonstrated the futility of resistance. This shift in perspective reframed the construction of the Arks from a purely military initiative to an expression of their existential beliefs. In this way, the Arks became not only siege engines, but embodiments of their creators' devotion to spreading ruin. Finally, the timeline leading up to the first emergence of the Arks was marked by a surge in experimentation with warp-spawned constructs. Attempts to integrate demonic essence with machine components had existed for centuries, but most prior efforts resulted in either catastrophic failure or instability. The breakthrough that made the Arks of Omen possible came when certain warlords and sorcerers discovered how to anchor chaotic energies within vast starship hulls, ensuring their power would remain bound long enough to wreak unprecedented havoc. This discovery represented a grim milestone in the fusion of warpcraft and engineering. In the end, the circumstances that led to the birth of the Arks of Omen can be traced to the culmination of desperation, forgotten knowledge, and the unquenchable thirst for destruction. They arose as answers to the chaos engulfing the galaxy, forged from suffering, ambition, and the belief that total obliteration was preferable to defeat. This brutal convergence of forces set the stage for the next chapter in the galaxy's unending war, one where entire civilizations would tremble before the shadow of an Ark looming on the horizon. The construction and evolution of the Arks of Omen were far from static processes. These colossal constructs underwent numerous iterations and enhancements as their creators refined their designs to meet both practical and destructive purposes. From their initial conception to the terrifying war engines that later emerged, each stage in their development reflected a grim blend of experimentation, necessity, and malevolent ingenuity. The earliest prototypes of the Arks were crude compared to the devastating leviathans that would later terrorize the galaxy. These initial constructs focused primarily on scale and resilience, intended to house vast armies and serve as mobile fortresses. However, their lack of efficient warp integration and energy control made them unwieldy, prone to catastrophic failure when subjected to the immense stress of sustained warp travel. Some early versions were consumed by their own internal instability, collapsing into ruin before reaching their targets. The response to these failures was a radical shift in design philosophy. Instead of relying solely on brute strength and size, their creators began incorporating arcane stabilization methods to better channel and contain warp energies. This involved intricate wards, sacrificial nodes, and binding rites inscribed into the very hulls of the ships. These adjustments allowed the Arks to withstand the volatile nature of the Imperium, making them far more reliable tools of destruction. With the success of these stabilization efforts came the opportunity to focus on offensive capabilities. The second wave of Arks of Omen was equipped with devastating long-range weapon systems designed not only to destroy fleets, but to reduce entire planets to ruin. These armaments were a blend of traditional weaponry and warp-based technologies, capable of unleashing reality-distorting barrages that defied conventional defense measures. The destructive potential of the Arks grew exponentially with these modifications, turning them into symbols of annihilation that could single-handedly break sieges and force entire sectors into submission. As the Arks evolved, their role in warfare expanded. No longer limited to acting as simple siege platforms, they became instruments of psychological warfare as well. Their presence alone was enough to destabilize planetary populations, with entire worlds surrendering before the first shot was fired. Recognizing this, their creators began outfitting them with features intended to exacerbate fear and despair. Hulls were engraved with blasphemous symbols and adorned with the remains of past conquests, serving as grim reminders of their invincibility. The next phase of development saw a shift in the internal structure of the Arks. Their labyrinthine corridors were deliberately designed to be confusing and perilous, functioning as traps for any who dared to board them. These modifications turned the Arks into self-contained death worlds where invaders faced relentless ambushes, automated defenses, and warp-twisted horrors lurking in the shadows. This internal complexity made them nearly impervious to infiltration, as boarding parties were often lost or consumed before they could even reach their objectives. Another significant innovation during this phase was the refinement of the Ark's navigational capabilities. The initial versions had relied on crude, unstable warp jumps, often emerging off-course or dangerously close to collapse. To address this, their creators integrated specialized guidance systems that synchronized with warp currents, allowing the vessels to traverse the Imperium with unprecedented precision. These upgrades ensured that the Arks could arrive at their targets undetected, appearing suddenly like omens of destruction without warning. Later iterations of the Arks incorporated biomechanical elements, melding organic components with machinery in ways that defied natural understanding. These living systems were capable of self-repair, feeding off warp energy to regenerate damaged sections of the vessel. In some cases, the Ark itself became semi-sentient, reacting to threats with an almost predatory intelligence. This transformation blurred the line between ship and living entity, making the Arks even more unpredictable and deadly. As the scope of the Ark's missions grew, so too did their adaptability. Certain versions were modified to function as mobile foundries, capable of producing additional war material mid-campaign. Others served as command centers for vast warp incursions, coordinating legions of demonic forces across entire star systems. These specialized variants demonstrated the versatility of the Ark design, proving that they could be tailored for specific strategic roles while retaining their core purpose as engines of terror. The culmination of these advancements was the creation of Command Arks, flagships that combined the most devastating features of previous versions into singular apex constructs. These command arcs were often the centerpieces of massive invasions, their destructive potential eclipsing that of entire fleets. Their presence signaled not just an attack, but the beginning of an apocalyptic campaign intended to rewrite the fate of entire sectors. Despite these technological strides, the evolution of the arcs was not without setbacks. Some experiments resulted in uncontrollable anomalies, vessels that became so saturated with warp energy that they tore themselves apart or became gateways to unspeakable horrors. However, even these failures served as grim lessons, pushing their creators to refine their methods and double their efforts. Each setback was viewed not as a defeat, but as a necessary step toward perfection. Ultimately, the progression of the Arks of Omen from crude warships to apocalyptic dreadnoughts reflects the relentless ambition and ingenuity of their creators. Each phase in their development brought new horrors to the galaxy, cementing their reputation as instruments of cosmic ruin. With every iteration, they became more efficient, more resilient, and more terrifying. A reminder that in a universe consumed by war, innovation is often born from the desire to wield ever greater destruction. Amidst the vast complexity surrounding the creation of the Arks of Omen, one pivotal event stands out as both a defining moment and an unsettling mystery: the discovery and integration of a singular ancient artifact known only by its ominous moniker, the Horror Engine. This enigmatic device, recovered from the depths of a long-forgotten star system engulfed in warp storms, became the catalyst that transformed the Arks from ambitious warships into unparalleled engines of cosmic terror. Its origin and true nature remain cloaked in secrecy, even among those who wield its power, adding an unsettling layer of intrigue to its already fearsome reputation. The circumstances of the Horror Engine's discovery are shrouded in conflicting reports and fragmented accounts. What is known is that the artifact was unearthed in a location that defied known galactic cartography, a dead zone of space where the Imperium's influence was so intense that reality itself became frayed. Some accounts speak of a drifting void station encased in a decaying temporal field, while others describe a planet reduced to a crystalline husk, its surface etched with alien symbols that no species could comprehend. Regardless of the true location, it is said that those who ventured near the artifact were irrevocably changed, as though their very minds had glimpsed something forbidden. The Horror Engine was unlike any known creation, pulsing with a steady rhythm of cold, alien power that seemed disconnected from both the warp and real space. When it was finally taken and studied, it defied every attempt at classification. Some theorized that it was a remnant of an ancient empire long lost to time, while others believed it to be a fragment of the Imperium itself, crystallized into a malevolent form. Regardless of its origin, those who sought to understand its nature quickly learned that knowledge came at a steep price. Entire cadres of researchers and warlocks assigned to its analysis vanished without explanation, or worse, were found driven to madness, their final ravings warning of something lurking between the veils. The decision to integrate the Horror Engine into the Arks of Omen was not one made lightly. The warlords and architects overseeing the project knew the artifact's potential for catastrophe, but were enticed by its promise of unparalleled power. The device's true function was unclear, yet preliminary experiments suggested that it could amplify warp energies to an unprecedented degree, turning even a fragment of its power into a cataclysmic force. However, activating the Horror Engine was not as simple as connecting it to a power core. It required a form of communion, an attunement between the device and its wielder that bordered on a ritualistic bond. This moment marked a decisive turning point. Once the Horror Engine was installed within the first prototype Ark, its influence began to reshape the very framework of the ship. Metallic structures twisted and grew like living things, forming labyrinthine corridors and expanding the vessel's hull, seemingly of their own accord. The ship's internal systems became semi-autonomous, reacting to external stimuli as though alive. It was as if the horror engine had fused with the Ark on a fundamental level, creating something entirely new and terrifying. Yet the true magnitude of this decision only became apparent during the first full activation of an Ark equipped with the horror engine. When the artifact's power surged, it did not merely enhance the ship's destructive capabilities, it warped the very space around it. The surrounding void shimmered and fractured, and localized reality itself began to dissolve, as if the ship's presence unstitched the fabric of existence. Fleet formations were annihilated not by conventional weapons, but by the sudden implosion of space-time, drawn into vortexes that appeared and vanished in moments. This display of power cemented the Arks of Omen as something far more than technological achievements. They became cosmic horrors, weapons of devastation that defied mortal comprehension. However, the activation of the horror engine was not without consequence. The same distortions that made the Arks unstoppable also threatened to unravel them if misused. The balancing act required to maintain control over the artifact was precarious, and even the slightest miscalculation could lead to catastrophic feedback, causing the Ark to implode or tear a rift into the Imperium. Despite the inherent dangers, the horror engine became the core of the Ark's dominance. It was a risk their creators were willing to take, for the rewards were too great to ignore. Yet questions persisted. What was the true origin of the horror engine? Was it a weapon left behind by a forgotten race, or something more insidious, an anchor from another reality intended to breach the boundaries of this one? Even those who reveled in its power could not escape the nagging unease that came with its use, as though they were puppets in a greater scheme beyond their understanding. The horror engine's inclusion represented more than a technological leap. It was a metaphysical gamble that fundamentally changed the nature of war in the galaxy. It was a decision that transformed the Arks from siege engines into apocalyptic harbingers, binding them to a force that could neither be explained nor fully controlled. This fateful choice would ripple across time and space, embedding itself in the whispered fears of those who watched helplessly as the Arks descended upon their worlds. In the end, the horror engine was both a triumph and a warning. Its presence reshaped the course of history, but the deeper truth of its existence remained elusive. Its dark, rhythmic pulse was a reminder that some decisions once made cannot be undone, and that the price of wielding ultimate power is often paid in ways unseen until it is too late. The deployment of the Arks of Omen sent shockwaves across the galaxy, their devastating presence forever altering the delicate balance of power among the countless factions vying for survival. Entire regions of space that had once teetered on the edge of conflict were now thrown into full-scale war as the Arks carved paths of ruin through vital star systems. For both the Imperium and its enemies, the Arks were not merely warships, but harbingers of unprecedented destruction, a symbol that the age of conventional warfare had given way to something far darker and more chaotic. The most immediate and terrifying impact of the Arks was their sheer unpredictability. Unlike traditional fleets, which adhered to some degree of strategic logic, the Arks could appear seemingly out of nowhere, tearing through the Imperium with unnatural precision. This ability to strike without warning meant that even heavily fortified worlds could not count on their defenses. Entire planetary garrisons fell into disarray, unable to respond to an enemy that bypassed their outer defenses in an instant. The psychological toll was immense. Whole sectors became gripped by paranoia, their populations convinced that annihilation was only moments away. For the Imperium of man, the Arks represented a nightmare made real. The already stretched resources of the Adeptus Astartes, Imperial Navy, and Astra Militarum were insufficient to contain the threat posed by even a single Ark, let alone multiple vessels operating across different war zones. Defensive strategies that had endured for millennia crumbled under the weight of the Ark's unique capabilities. Commanders faced an impossible dilemma: either concentrate their forces to defend key worlds and risk leaving entire subsectors vulnerable, or scatter their fleets in a desperate attempt to predict where the next attack would come. Neither approach proved effective. The destruction caused by the Arks was not limited to military installations. Civilian populations bore the brunt of their fury, with entire cities reduced to ash by bombardments or consumed by the nightmarish warp phenomena that accompanied their arrival. Refugee fleets clogged the stars as displaced billions fled from worlds they believed doomed. However, these migrations often led to further chaos, as overcrowded transport ships became easy targets for raiders and opportunists who exploited the turmoil. Humanitarian crises on a galactic scale emerged as sectors struggled to cope with the sheer volume of displaced populations, fueling unrest and rebellion in Imperial territories already weakened by centuries of war. The Arks also had a profound effect on the Imperium's morale and religious fervor. While many turned to the Imperial cult for solace, others began to doubt the Emperor's protection, questioning how such horrors could be unleashed if humanity's divine guardian still watched over his people. Inquisitors and ecclesiarchal representatives found themselves fighting not only against the physical threat of the Arks, but also against growing ideological fractures. Entire cults dedicated to apocalyptic prophecy sprang up across Imperial space, preaching that the Arks were omens of a final reckoning. These cults spread like wildfire in areas devastated by the Arks, often inciting riots and open rebellion. The Xenos factions of the galaxy reacted to the emergence of the Arks in varying ways. Some, like the Orcs, viewed these monstrous warships as irresistible challenges, seeking them out for the chance to engage in battles of unprecedented scale. Others, such as the Eldar, saw the rise of the Arks as further confirmation of their ancient prophecies of doom. Eldar seers warned that the Arks represented a tipping point in the balance between order and chaos, and their fleets scrambled to intercept these vessels before they could unravel key strands of fate. Meanwhile, the enigmatic Necrons perceived the Arks as a threat to the delicate equilibrium of the cosmos, though their motivations remained inscrutable to outside observers. For the forces of chaos, the Arks were both a triumph and a source of internal strife. Many warlords, intoxicated by the sheer power of these constructs, began launching campaigns of unchecked destruction, often with little regard for the broader strategies of their patrons. This recklessness led to internal conflicts, as rival factions vied for control of the Arks or sought to claim the glory of annihilation for themselves. In some cases, entire war bands were wiped out when rival Chaos forces clashed over dominance, their mutual hatred outweighing their shared purpose. These internal struggles did little to slow the devastation wrought by the Arks, but they sowed the seeds of discord that would have consequences in the wars to come. One of the most insidious impacts of the Arks was the spread of instability within the warp itself. The activation of the horror engine at the heart of each Ark created ripples that spread far beyond the immediate battlefield. Warp storms intensified, making entire regions impassable for Imperial and Xenos fleets alike. This disruption further isolated vulnerable worlds, cutting off vital reinforcements and supply lines. For many planets, the arrival of an Ark was not just the end of their defenses, but the severing of any hope for rescue. This cosmic isolation deepened the despair of those stranded in the path of destruction. Despite their overwhelming power, the Arks also created an unforeseen ripple effect among the galaxy's defenders. For every planet that was consumed in flame, there were others that rose in defiance. The sheer scale of the threat forced unlikely alliances and moments of unparalleled heroism. On some worlds, Imperial commanders abandoned rigid doctrines in favor of innovative and desperate tactics. Civilians armed with little more than salvaged weapons took up arms alongside military forces, creating legendary last stands that would be remembered as symbols of resilience. In their attempts to destroy hope, the Arks often inadvertently forged new myths of defiance. Yet even in these moments of resistance, the scars left by the Arks could not be denied. The devastation they unleashed reshaped the very map of the galaxy, rendering once prosperous regions as desolate wastelands. Strategic bastions that had stood for millennia were reduced to ruins, their ashes drifting through space as grim reminders of the Ark's passage. The fallout from these cataclysmic assaults lingered long after the warships moved on, with famine, disease, and lawlessness claiming countless lives in the aftermath. The legacy of the Arks of Omen became etched into the collective memory of the galaxy, a stark reminder that power unchecked by reason leads only to ruin. In their wake, they left behind not just destruction, but a sense of vulnerability that reverberated through every corner of the cosmos. The Arks had not just reshaped the physical reality of the universe. They had reshaped its very spirit, leaving those who survived to grapple with a chilling truth. There are some forces so vast and terrifying that survival feels more like a postponement of doom than a victory. One of the most captivating and often debated aspects of the Arks of Omen is their construction, particularly the blend of arcane technology, warp-binding rituals, and grotesque living components that make them unlike any other vessels in the galaxy. While many warships of the 41st millennium are marvels of engineering in their own right, the Arks stand apart as grim abominations that defy conventional logic. Their uniqueness lies not only in their destructive potential, but in the methods of their assembly, the peculiar nature of their internal systems, and the eerie sentience that many claim they possess. A widely discussed topic among enthusiasts is the origins of the materials used to build these colossal ships. Unlike standard starships, which rely on mined metals and painstakingly forged alloys, the Arks incorporate organic elements harvested from worlds lost to war. These are not merely aesthetic adornments, but functional components that pulse with grotesque vitality. Warp-born flesh is often fused into key structural points, lending the Arks an unsettling semblance of life. Some accounts suggest that entire sections of these vessels breathe or shift subtly, almost as if reacting to external stimuli. This has led to speculation that the ships themselves may be partially conscious, driven by a malevolent will born from the fusion of machine and immaterium. Another point of fascination is the horror engine at the core of each Ark, a device whose exact mechanics remain a mystery even to those responsible for its construction. While its role in amplifying warp energies is understood, its internal workings defy known technological principles. Theories abound within the community, with some believing that the horror engine is a form of warp capacitor that stores psychic resonance and releases it in devastating pulses. Others propose that it acts as a dimensional anchor, stabilizing the otherwise volatile nature of warp-enhanced propulsion and weaponry. Regardless of the theory, one fact remains undisputed. The activation of the horror engine warps the space within and around the Ark in ways that science cannot fully explain, leading to bizarre and unpredictable phenomena. A particularly chilling feature of the Arks is the presence of sacrificial chambers built directly into their core systems. These chambers serve a grim purpose, maintaining the Ark's integrity by offering a constant stream of psychic or physical sacrifices. This act of sustained slaughter ensures that the warp energies coursing through the ship remain bound and directed, rather than tearing the vessel apart. The exact toll of these rituals remains unknown, but it is believed that thousands of souls may be consumed in a single voyage. The presence of these chambers and the horrifying purpose they serve fuels endless discussion, with some speculating that the true cost of powering the Arks could rival the death tolls of entire planetary exterminations. The architecture of the Arks is another subject of intrigue, as it appears to blend styles from numerous lost civilizations. Observers have noted elements resembling the ruins of pre-imperial human cultures, as well as Xenos influences that defy categorization. Some believe that the architects of the Ark scavenged remnants from ancient void-faring civilizations and repurposed them into a nightmarish whole. Others argue that the ship's ever-shifting form may be a deliberate reflection of chaos itself, a representation of entropy given physical shape. The labyrinthine corridors and asymmetrical design are not merely artistic choices, but serve to disorient and confound any who dare to board these vessels. One of the most controversial theories circulating among fans involves the potential sentience of the Arks. While most warp-infused constructs display some degree of malevolent instinct, the Arks exhibit behaviors that seem to go beyond programmed responses. There are numerous accounts of Arks seemingly choosing their targets, altering course without external commands, and reacting with calculated malice to unexpected threats. Some believe this is evidence that the horror engine itself harbors an intelligence, one that is subtly manipulating the actions of its masters. Others argue that the Arks are merely the products of intricate systems that mimic sentience without truly possessing it. This debate continues to fuel speculation, as no definitive answers have ever been uncovered. Another topic often discussed is the Ark's ability to create and sustain smaller warp anomalies within their structure. These anomalies, known as sub-realities, function as isolated pockets of immaterium where time and space behave erratically. Some believe these sub-realities are used to imprison captured souls or serve as reservoirs for raw warp energy. There are even whispers of entire boarding parties disappearing within these voids, their fate unknown. The idea that parts of the ship may exist outside normal space feeds into the perception that the Arks are more than warships. They are extensions of the Imperium itself. The Ark's weapon systems are also a frequent subject of fascination. Unlike conventional starships that rely on plasma batteries, macro cannons, or missile silos, the Arks employ weaponry that bends the fabric of reality. Their primary offensive arrays emit energy waves capable of disrupting molecular cohesion, causing matter to unravel at a fundamental level. The effects of these weapons vary wildly, ranging from instantaneous disintegration to agonizing temporal fractures where victims experience years of decay in mere moments. Fans often speculate about the origin of these devastating technologies, with some theorizing that they were reverse-engineered from weapons used during the War in Heaven, a conflict so ancient that only fragments of its legacy remain. Finally, there is the enduring mystery of how the Arks sustain their immense power requirements. While warp energy provides a limitless source of fuel, its containment and direction require a stabilizing force that has baffled scholars for millennia. Some believe that the Arks draw their stability from the combined will of their crew, using their psychic resonance as a tether. This theory suggests that the loss of a commanding presence aboard an Ark could lead to catastrophic instability, a fact that lends credence to stories of Arks collapsing into oblivion after the death of their masters. However, others argue that the Arks are self-sustaining, feeding off the ambient energies of the warp itself, like parasitic leviathans drifting through the void. The Arks of Omen remain one of the most enigmatic creations in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, inspiring awe, fear, and endless speculation. Each theory, whether grounded in lore or pure conjecture, adds another layer to the mystery surrounding these apocalyptic constructs. Fans continue to debate not only their origins and purpose, but the very nature of their existence, perpetuating a narrative as complex and haunting as the Arks themselves. At the center of the narrative surrounding the Arks of Omen are several pivotal figures whose ambitions, decisions, and flaws shaped the creation and deployment of these apocalyptic vessels. These individuals were more than just cogs in a chaotic war machine. They were the visionaries, commanders, and architects whose motivations and obsessions pushed the boundaries of what was possible and what should never have been attempted. One of the most feared figures associated with the Arks is a warlord renowned not only for his military genius, but for his ruthless pragmatism. He is known for his cold, calculating demeanor and the ability to adapt to any scenario, often turning apparent defeats into crushing victories. Unlike many of his counterparts, he views the Arks not as symbols of devotion or destruction for its own sake, but as precision instruments of galactic reformation. His obsession with efficiency drives him to purge any weakness within his ranks, leading to an unyielding and disciplined force that operates with mechanical precision. Yet his relentless pursuit of perfection is also his greatest flaw, as it blinds him to the unpredictable nature of the warp and the organic chaos that comes with it. Those who have served under him speak of his unwavering focus, but also of the crushing fear he instills, for failure in his eyes is met with unrelenting punishment. Another key player in the story of the Arks is an ancient sorcerer whose mastery over the Imperium borders on the legendary. This individual is not merely a practitioner of warp sorcery, but a scholar of forbidden knowledge, having spent centuries studying arcane texts and conducting ritualistic experiments to uncover the deeper mysteries of reality itself. His understanding of the warp's fluctuating nature made him instrumental in stabilizing the horror engine and weaving its power into the hull of the Arks. His strength lies in his unparalleled knowledge and his ability to manipulate both allies and enemies through deception and cunning. However, his greatest weakness is his insatiable thirst for greater understanding. He believes himself capable of controlling the Imperium's chaotic forces, yet time and again, his experiments have unleashed horrors that spiral beyond his control. This hubris has led many to speculate that his fate is intertwined with the very forces he believes he has mastered. Another figure deeply entwined in the creation of the Arks is an infamous artificer known for his unparalleled skill in merging machinery with the arcane. His works are notorious across the galaxy for their grotesque yet brilliant craftsmanship. He is responsible for designing the biomechanical systems that give the Arks their terrifying regenerative capabilities and semi-sentient traits. Unlike traditional engineers who work with schematics and logic, he operates with a twisted form of intuition, claiming that the machines speak to him in visions. His creations are revered for their ingenuity, but feared for their inherent unpredictability, as they often seem to operate according to their own incomprehensible logic. This artificer's greatest strength is his unparalleled creativity, but his flaw lies in his disregard for consequence. He cares little for the aftermath of his creations, viewing destruction and chaos as necessary byproducts of progress. This indifference has led to catastrophic failures and the loss of entire fleets when his inventions have spiraled beyond containment. Another prominent personality associated with the Arks is a prophet whose visions of destruction have shaped the strategic use of these warships. Unlike most seers who focus on distant futures clouded by uncertainty, this individual's predictions are eerily specific, often detailing exact times, locations, and outcomes with chilling accuracy. Their influence within their faction stems from the undeniable precision of their foresight, which has led to decisive victories and the destruction of countless worlds. However, this figure's reliance on their visions has made them rigid and inflexible. When events deviate from their predicted path, they are prone to paranoia and fear, as though their very identity is unraveling. This vulnerability has been exploited by their enemies, who seek to disrupt their foresight through deception and misdirection. Among the defenders who have risen in opposition to the Arks of Omen is a rogue commander known for his unorthodox tactics and refusal to bow to higher authority. This figure emerged from the chaos of a sector devastated by the Arks, rallying remnants of shattered fleets and planetary forces into a guerrilla-style resistance. His ingenuity and charisma have made him a symbol of hope for those who refuse to be subjugated by the terror of the Arks. His strength lies in his adaptability and his ability to inspire others, even in the darkest moments. However, his defiance of hierarchical command has earned him the ire of more rigid leaders, and his impulsive nature has led to disastrous engagements when his bold strategies failed to anticipate the full might of the Arks. One of the most controversial figures in the saga of the Arks is a former loyalist who defected after witnessing the sheer scale of destruction wrought by the war. Believing that the Imperium was incapable of halting the advance of these apocalyptic warships, this individual chose to side with the enemy, convinced that only by mastering the power of the horror engine could they hope to reshape the galaxy's future. Their betrayal is viewed as unforgivable by their former allies, yet their intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics has made them a formidable strategist within the ranks of chaos. Their strength lies in their deep understanding of both sides of the conflict, but their weakness is the shadow of doubt that lingers within them. Haunted by the atrocities they have committed and the lives they have destroyed, they walk a fine line between conviction and remorse. Each of these individuals represents a different facet of the horrors surrounding the Arks of Omen: the visionary, the scholar, the artificer, the prophet, the rebel, and the betrayer. Their actions and ambitions have shaped the course of galactic history, intertwining with the rise of these terrifying constructs in ways both direct and indirect. Yet for all their power and influence, they remain bound by the same fate that claims all those who seek to control forces beyond mortal comprehension. The galaxy remembers them not only for their deeds, but for the legacies they left behind. Legacies written in fire, ruin, and the unrelenting echoes of the Arks as they drift through the void. One of the most hotly debated aspects surrounding the Arks of Omen is the true origin and nature of the horror engine itself. While some believe it to be an arcane masterpiece created by the twisted genius of chaos sorcerers, others propose far more unsettling theories. A common hypothesis among those who study forbidden lore is that the horror engine is not a creation in the traditional sense, but rather a relic from an ancient and forgotten age. Some suggest that it predates even the rise of humanity, possibly linked to one of the enigmatic pre-imperial civilizations, or even an unknown xenospecies whose understanding of the Imperium surpassed anything known today. This theory has led to heated debates about whether the horror engine is truly of chaos origin or if it was discovered and repurposed by the forces of the warp. If the latter is true, the question remains: what kind of intelligence first devised it, and for what purpose? Some theorists argue that it may not have been intended as a weapon at all. Instead, it could have been some form of ancient containment device or dimensional stabilizer that was corrupted over time. This idea raises disturbing questions about whether the Arks themselves are functioning as intended or if their destructive capabilities are merely a twisted side effect of a repurposed tool. Another enduring mystery is the question of how many horror engines exist. It is unclear whether the device is unique, duplicated, or a manifestation that can be summoned multiple times through dark rituals. If only one horror engine exists, this would imply that each Ark is merely an extension of a singular, incomprehensible entity, a terrifying prospect that has fueled speculation about the true sentience of the construct. Conversely, if there are multiple versions, the implications are equally grim. It suggests that a vast reservoir of forbidden knowledge exists somewhere, capable of producing more of these apocalyptic devices should the right circumstances align. The mechanics of how the horror engine interacts with the Imperium also remain a point of contention. Unlike typical warp-based technology, which often relies on psychers or demonic entities for direction, the horror engine appears to operate with a level of autonomy that defies standard classifications. Some believe it taps into a deeper, more primal layer of the warp, one beyond the influence of the chaos gods themselves. This theory suggests that the Arks of Omen are powered not by the will of specific deities, but by something far older and more intrinsic to the warp's chaotic essence. If true, this would mean that their creators may not fully understand the forces they have harnessed, and the long-term consequences could be catastrophic even for those who command the Arks. There is also the ongoing debate about the living components integrated into the Arks' designs. While it is known that organic material plays a crucial role in their construction, the exact nature of this biological input is highly contested. Some believe that the Arks require the essence of powerful psychers or other warp-sensitive beings to function, their psychic energy serving as a conduit for the horror engine's immense power. Others posit that the Arks feed on raw fear and suffering, sustained by the emotional resonance of the destruction they cause. This theory aligns with reports of increased warp activity following significant planetary assaults, as though the very act of annihilation strengthens the ship's presence within the Imperium. Another unresolved question revolves around the self-repairing capabilities of the Arks. Unlike conventional warships that require fleets of support vessels for maintenance, the Arks seem capable of regenerating even catastrophic damage over time. The source of this regenerative ability has never been fully explained. Some hypothesize that it is a byproduct of the warp-forged biomechanical systems within the ship, while others believe that the Arks are tapping into a continuous stream of warp energy that allows them to heal their structure. The idea that the Arks are effectively immortal unless utterly annihilated has led to dire speculation about whether they can ever truly be destroyed or if they will simply reform elsewhere in the Imperium. One of the more ominous theories is that the horror engine may be capable of evolving. While this idea is dismissed by some as fear-mongering, others point to subtle changes observed in the behavior of different Arks. Some have reported that later Arks exhibit increased levels of autonomous action, as though adapting to challenges they previously encountered. If the horror engine possesses the ability to learn and grow stronger over time, it raises the grim possibility that future iterations of the Arks will be even more dangerous and unpredictable. Another lingering mystery concerns the ultimate purpose of the Arks of Omen. While they are undeniably weapons of mass destruction, there is speculation that their true purpose extends beyond mere conquest. Some theorists believe that the Arks may be part of a larger cosmic ritual, one intended to reshape the fabric of the galaxy itself. This theory posits that the coordinated emergence of multiple Arks across disparate regions of space is not a coincidence, but part of a grand design. Whether this design serves a single architect's will or the chaotic whims of the Imperium remains unknown. The fate of those who serve aboard the Arks is also a point of grim speculation. While it is understood that mortal and warp-born crews operate these ships, reports of missing personnel and strange disappearances hint at a darker truth. Some believe that the Arks themselves consume their own crews over time, using their life essence to sustain their operations. Others argue that prolonged exposure to the horror engine's influence warps the minds and bodies of the crew, transforming them into something far removed from their original forms. These theories are supported by the unsettling silence that often accompanies attempts to communicate with an Ark after prolonged engagements, as though the vessel itself has absorbed its inhabitants into its malignant design. The greatest mystery of all, however, may be what happens when an Ark is destroyed. Accounts of their destruction are few and often conflicting, with some suggesting that the vessels implode into warp rifts, while others claim they simply vanish without a trace. This inconsistency fuels speculation that the Arks may not be destroyed in the conventional sense, but rather pulled back into the Imperium, where they await reconstitution. If true, this would mean that the Arks of Omen are not merely physical constructs, but manifestations of an eternal force that cannot be permanently undone. These lingering questions and theories continue to fuel discussion and debate within the Warhammer 40,000 community. The Arks of Omen represent more than just powerful warships. They are enigmas that defy understanding, leaving a trail of destruction and unanswered questions in their wake. Their very existence challenges the fundamental assumptions of warfare, reality, and the Imperium itself, ensuring that the mystery of their creation remains one of the most captivating and unsettling tales in the grim darkness of the far future. The long-term implications of the Arks of Omen reverberate far beyond the immediate devastation they cause. These apocalyptic vessels have reshaped not only the battlefields of the present, but also the future trajectory of galactic conflict, political dynamics, and even the understanding of technological and metaphysical boundaries. Their emergence has introduced new uncertainties and escalated the stakes in the unending war that defines the galaxy. One of the most significant consequences of the Arks is the paradigm shift in the way warfare is approached. The ability of a single Ark to bypass traditional defenses and obliterate entire systems has forced both the Imperium and its adversaries to reevaluate their military doctrines. Fortress worlds, long considered impenetrable bastions, have been reduced to ashes in the face of this new threat. This has spurred a desperate scramble for innovation and adaptation, with various factions seeking ways to detect, intercept, or counter the Ark's warp-enabled strikes. However, the resources required to develop effective countermeasures are immense, straining the already overstretched military-industrial complexes of the galaxy. This may lead to an arms race with devastating repercussions, as factions divert ever more resources to match the destructive potential of the Arks. The psychological impact of the Arks cannot be overstated. They have become synonymous with doom, their mere mention enough to spread fear and paranoia across countless worlds. Populations living in vulnerable regions of space have grown increasingly disillusioned with their leaders, questioning whether any defense is possible against such overwhelming power. This erosion of faith has sparked waves of unrest, rebellion, and even mass migrations as desperate communities attempt to flee potential targets. Entire sectors have become destabilized, with planetary governors resorting to authoritarian measures to maintain order amid the chaos. In the long term, this widespread disillusionment could fracture political alliances, weaken morale, and foster the rise of insurrectionist movements. On the other hand, the threat posed by the Arks has also forged unexpected alliances. Factions with long-standing animosities have been forced to set aside their differences, at least temporarily, in the face of a shared existential threat. Some Imperial commanders have even accepted aid from groups they once deemed heretical or untrustworthy, recognizing that survival may depend on unity rather than dogmatic adherence to old rivalries. While these alliances are often fragile and fleeting, they hint at the potential for new political landscapes to emerge, ones shaped not solely by ancient grudges, but by the pragmatic need to endure. However, these alliances may also sow seeds of future conflict, as hardliners within each faction reject any notion of cooperation and seek to punish those they perceive as traitors to their cause. The technological legacy of the Arks of Omen is another point of contention. For both their creators and their enemies, the Arks represent a terrifying leap in the fusion of warp sorcery and machinery. The secrets behind their construction remain elusive, yet the very fact that such vessels exist has inspired others to pursue their own experiments with warp-bound technology. Rogue technomancers and radical factions within the Mechanicus have already begun delving into forbidden research in an attempt to replicate or counter the Ark's capabilities. This pursuit of knowledge may lead to breakthroughs that reshape the technological landscape of the galaxy, but it also carries the risk of catastrophic failure. The Imperium is an unpredictable force, and attempts to harness it often end in disaster. Entire Forge worlds could be consumed by their own hubris, and the boundaries between reality and the warp could be further eroded in ways that no one can control. The Arks have also influenced the religious and cultural beliefs of countless civilizations. For many within the Imperium, their existence is seen as proof of the Emperor's divine test, a crucible through which humanity must prove its worth. Ecclesiarchal leaders have seized upon the narrative of the Arks as instruments of cosmic judgment, rallying their followers to resist with fervent zeal. This has led to the rise of militant cults dedicated to martyrdom, believing that their sacrifice in the face of the Ark's onslaught will earn them eternal glory in the Emperor's sight. However, this zealotry has also resulted in reckless decisions and unnecessary losses, as commanders driven by faith rather than strategy lead their forces into unwinnable battles. Meanwhile, in more isolated regions of the galaxy, nihilistic cults have emerged that view the Arks as heralds of an inevitable apocalypse, preaching that resistance is futile and that submission to chaos is the only path to survival. Among Xeno civilizations, the arrival of the Arks has forced some species to reconsider their long-term strategies. The Eldar, whose fragile remnants already teeter on the brink of extinction, have become increasingly divided over how to respond. Some advocate for preemptive strikes against any signs of Ark activity, regardless of the cost, while others argue for retreat and preservation, believing that the Ark's destructive path cannot be altered. The Orcs, in contrast, revel in the chaos the Arks have caused, viewing them as the ultimate challenge and seeking to claim these monstrous warships for themselves. The Necrons, with their ancient knowledge and enigmatic motives, may possess insights into the true nature of the horror engine, but whether they will act to preserve or exploit this knowledge remains a matter of speculation. In the broader cosmic sense, the Arks may have inadvertently accelerated the unraveling of the galaxy's already fragile stability. The immense warp disturbances caused by their activation have led to the expansion of warp storms and the creation of new, unpredictable rifts in space-time. Travel between star systems has become even more hazardous, and entire regions have been cut off from communication and trade, plunging them into isolation. The proliferation of such rifts could have long-term implications, potentially reshaping the galactic map as navigational routes are lost and new anomalies emerge. Yet, for all the destruction they have wrought, the Arks of Omen have also served as a grim reminder of the resilience of those who refuse to yield. Tales of unlikely victories, last stands, and acts of defiance have begun to spread, inspiring a new generation of leaders and heroes. These stories may serve as a beacon of hope in an era defined by despair, reinforcing the belief that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, survival is possible. However, whether this spark of hope will be enough to withstand the growing tide of destruction remains uncertain. Ultimately, the Arks of Omen represent a turning point in the galaxy's history. Their existence has altered the trajectory of countless civilizations, forcing them to confront both their limitations and their potential. Whether this will lead to an age of unprecedented innovation and unity, or plunge the galaxy further into chaos and fragmentation, is a question that will be answered not in a single moment, but over centuries of conflict and strife. One thing is certain: the legacy of the Arks of Omen will echo through the ages, leaving an indelible mark on the grim and endless saga of the far future.